This week on BSD Now, Allan is back down from Europe. We'll get to hear some of his wrap-up and get caught up on all the latest BSD news. That plus our interview with Backtrace.io, folks. It's going to be fun, so keep it tuned to BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 140, tracing it back to BSD, recorded May the 4th, 2016. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Allan Jude.
And of course, May the 4th be with you. So all my Star Wars fans out there, sorry, Allan. Just had to get that out there. I'm wearing my awesome Calvin Hobbes unlicensed Star Wars shirt to go with it. So it's a good day. I'm happy about that. But of course, you're not here to hear about Star Wars. You're here to hear about BSD this week. And first up, we have Allan. Of course, you're back from Europe. So tell us about your trip. How did this go? First of all, what was it?
Yes, so I was first. I went to a FreeBSD hackathon we had in Essen at the Linux Hotel, which is this big kind of estate out in the countryside in Germany, where they do training and stuff like that. But basically, they let us have a big room and rooms for the night and everything. And we were there Friday night. Everybody arrived and we had a barbecue. It was very nice. And then we hacked all the...
Is German barbecue different than North American?
There was more
barbecue?
Sausage, but
okay.
It's basically the same.
Out of curiosity.
We had, chicken and beef and sausage and bread and so on. So everybody arrived Friday night and we had a barbecue and had fun. And then Saturday we hacked all day. We started with breakfast early in the morning and then basically hacked until at lunch we had pizza and then we hacked all into the night and then we went out for dinner. Yeah, awesome. And then we came back and hacked some more.
Fancy that, a hackathon where hacking
exactly
gets done. That's pretty cool.
And then, we went to bed again and got up the next day and had breakfast and did stuff and then had dinners for lunch and popular German thing. And then hacked until about 3 o'clock, and then most people set out back home because most people had to go back to work on Monday.
Sure.
But it was a good time.
So when you say hacking, what kind of hacking? Like what was the
lots of different things. There was doc people, a lot of ports people. I know Christos Provos worked on some PF bugs and some jail stuff, trying to solve bunch of things. I worked on implementing SHA-512 truncated and the Skein hashing algorithm for ZFS, which is nice. Both of those are out for review now. Very cool. I know lots of docs people worked on quite a few commits there, and if you just search for Essen Hackathon in the commit log, most of them are tagged there. We also worked on the service command we have features in there to be able to get the status of every service that's running or restart every service so that you could script that, say, after you install security updates and you want to restart all the daemons, you can just one command and it'll loop through every service that's enabled and restart it.
Sure.
Bunch of cool stuff like that.
That's nice.
Yep. And then
very cool.
Benedict and I had to catch a train that afternoon and went to Berlin, which is like a 4-hour train ride away. Then we got to do tourist things on Monday and Tuesday. And then on Wednesday and Thursday, we were at the Open Source Data Center Conference. And on Thursday morning, we presented about ZFS to those people. And
how did that go? Pretty packed room?
It was a nice conference. It was well done. And I think our talk was well received. I think I would have done it slightly differently after everything. By the end, the feedback from people and so on is they knew a little bit less about ZFS than I kind of expected, and so I would have, I was trying to not do more than just explaining what ZFS is and actually talk about the cool things you could do with it, but some of that is a little harder to understand if you don't understand how different ZFS is than everything you've ever heard before, right? Sure. But the big one was like one of the previous talks was talking about tuning your operating system for SQL. And it was like, well, if you use LVM, which is kind of the closest things Linux had to ZFS previously, if you enable snapshots, that takes about 40% of your performance away. and then each additional snapshot you have takes another 4 or 5%. And it's like,
Ouch.
yeah, ZFS doesn't have that. You don't. It doesn't make a difference. Or even VMware snapshots. I know a lot of people complain that as soon as you have a snapshot, the performance just tanks. And on ZFS, it doesn't. Yeah.
Okay. Well, all in all, it sounds like you had a good trip.
There are links to all the talks, all the slides, all the pictures, and all the videos at the end of the show.
Okay, fantastic. Well, you guys will have to stick around for that. Go check out the show notes after you've seen this. Okay, well, I guess we should get right into the headlines here. So speaking of a lot of the hacking that's happened recently, we got a new update with the FreeBSD quarterly report that's out. Looks like Warren Block has written the introduction for that, which was pretty creative.
Yeah, he definitely pulled out the stops for the intro this time.
Yeah, definitely very cool.
I don't know how he's going to outdo himself for next time.
That's the problem, Warren. You set the bar too high. Like you're going to fall flat next time. No, but that was good. But some of the interesting projects that showed up in here, though, of course, the ASLR work that's going in or being worked on in FreeBSD. So that got mentioned. Porting Ceph to FreeBSD.
Yes,
also.
that one was interesting because Ceph's basically a clustered file system. And in this case, the person doing the porting wants to do... Ceph has this concept called like RDB, which is kind of Ceph's version of a zvol. And they want to be able to have Ceph as a clustered file system, export... the equivalent of a zvol, but clustered, and then use that for Beehive. So imagine ZFS, but with clustering and or a clustered virtual block device that you're using your VM on top of, but then it's actually written via Ceph on top of ZFS. So not just Ceph on FreeBSD, but Ceph on ZFS on FreeBSD.
That's kind of cool. Does it use? I've never used it before. I see it uses shell. Looks like it has a tox test as well or something? I don't know. Interesting. I may have to look into it. That is pretty cool looking. Okay, but the next one was, of course, the I/O rate limiting for RCTL, which we discussed a little bit a couple weeks back, talking about how that's going to be awesome and let you control jails a little bit better. Of course, VMs as well. So that's going to be awesome. The graphics stack in FreeBSD, of course, they mentioned that the Haswell support is in, so you can grab that today. And, of course, work is progressing quickly on the next update.
And they also
stay tuned
cover some of the GSOC projects that are being worked on in that area as well.
Okay, cool. And then, of course, the CAM I/O scheduler, I think it was Warren Losh was doing a bunch of that.
Yeah, that's originally from Netflix, but is very tunable, so it can be used for other types of workloads as well. The big thing it does is help you get more performance out of your SSDs by pipelining more stuff, but also in the Netflix case, the problem was they want to write to the SSD as fast as they can, but limit that such that it never causes the read speed on the SSD to go down. Because if you write too much data to the SSD, the SSD has to kind of like pause and do garbage collection and clean up because it can't. Yeah, its background processing can't keep up. So this basically allows it to tune the system to say, let the writing happen, but limit it at this. Start limiting it as soon as the latency on the reads starts going up, so that you get the maximum read performance always, while still getting as much write as you can get without having to make a trade-off.
So that's like the analog of what I do with my rate limiting for my upload here, where I only allow 95%-ish of my upload to happen, so I don't ever kill my download speeds. So sounds cool. Okay, so another thing is that the NFS server is getting some updates. It looks like they're working around the 16 group limit, so that's going to be good.
But the big thing is support for PNFS, which is basically another approach to clustering. And apparently that will be ready by late spring, and they'll be looking for testers for people that want to basically have an NFS share that's aggregating multiple servers, which is another interesting, when you run out of space on your storage server and you end up having multiple storage servers and trying to balance it, something like this seems very useful.
Very nice. Also, it looks like they did their static analysis of the kernel, the FreeBSD kernel, with a PBS Studio.
So in addition to the fact that Coverity donates their static analysis tool for FreeBSD, this Russian company ran their tool against FreeBSD and sent us the results so that we could fix some of the issues that they might have found and sort it out.
Okay. Nice. And then let's see, PCI Express hot plug work.
Yep,
So
that's
that happened.
Mostly been tested on laptop Express cards and so on. But if you have hardware where you can actually hot swap PCI Express cards in like a server, they would love to talk to people that could test it. That kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Especially if it has like the mechanical latches or attention buttons and stuff like that, so it can detect when it's locked and unlocked and so on.
Mm-hmm. So another one is the from the porting side, the GitLab port is happening. So that actually went in. That was a biggie. I remember taking a look at that. That's quite a monstrosity of a port, but now you have an easy button, so you should be able to just package at it and go about your business hosting your own GitLab system. Mm-hmm. Looks like with fast depends got added and some other improvements to the build system.
So that will allow, basically when you do a build world, currently it goes through every directory and builds the dependencies. And that took a long time, and now it's basically been improved, and there's a bunch of other work going on. One of the not finished yet items will be the ability to figure out that Clang hasn't changed and avoid recompiling it at the beginning of every build world.
That would be nice.
That'll be epic.
That is a big one.
Yes.
Please, thank you, please.
And then in Core's report at the top, they also talked a bit about the work. When we talked to John Baldwin a while ago, he mentioned that having a separate SVN tree somewhere where they contains the everything you need to build FreeBSD with newer GCC without actually contaminating the FreeBSD source tree with the GPL v3 code, but having it available for platforms that don't support that Clang doesn't support yet, or just for people that want to for one reason or another want to use the GCC toolchain instead of Clang. A way to have that available, but easily, separate from the system, but easy to turn on if you want it. And apparently there'll be a white paper about that. It'll be distributed soon to get people's opinions and decide what the best way to do it is. But that could be interesting to have a modern version of GCC available for stuff.
There is a lot happening, I think, in FreeBSD just in this past year. I mean, 11.0. When we have to do the release announcement for that and go over now, if you've been a regular listener here, you've probably heard most of it, because we've talked about it as it's happened, but man, that's going to be quite a action-packed release.
Yeah. The hardest part is going to be figuring out what's actually in it. There's so much has changed. And, there's so many things that I plan to have done in time for it that haven't happened either.
UEFI encrypted boot?
I haven't even started on that. I'm still trying to fix it for x86.
Oh, okay. Well, my laptop's almost ready. Well, cool. Okay. Well, of course, we'll keep you up to date on stuff as it happens on this. So stay tuned. And, of course, we'll look forward to 11 landing later this year. Okay. So we haven't looked at a Ted Uangst in a while, but, hey, we got a new article this week talking about what goes into the name of a program. Yeah, we got two of them this week. We'll have another one coming up in a minute. But definitely an interesting one talking about two similar programs that are really the same program with two names, for example, grep and egrep.
Yeah, so this one's looking at, so oftentimes programs get installed with a hard link. So there's multiple names that all point to the actual same binary. Like even on FreeBSD, the MD5 tool.
Like the rescue
directory. Well, rescue is a special one because it's a bunch of separate programs all in one binary. But like if you look at the tool that MD5, SHA-256, SHA-512, those are all similar hard links to the same binary. It's only one tool, and then it changes what it does based on what name it was called when you started it. And in this example, this was like grep and egrep do. When you run egrep, it's basically the same as running grep with the capital E flag. But so there's that. So how many names does a program actually have? Every program has at least 3 names. The name it has on the file system, which is, with the hard links, you can have multiple names. The name you actually called it with when you started it, right? And whatever the program actually thinks it's called. And under normal circumstances, the first two will be the same, but it's possible, it actually has an example here from calling the move utility, or inside move, it calls RM, but it calls it CP. For some reason, and luckily RM doesn't do anything different no matter what you call it when you run it, and so it doesn't cause weird things to happen. But it's interesting that one's in there. But there's other examples like the test program is also installed as bin / and then open square bracket, and that's used in shell scripts. But depending on what happens, it could change the name. And then looking in OpenBSD, prior to 5.7, OpenBSD looked at the entirety of the argv string, not just the base name of it. So it included the path name. So calling the program as like .. directory / whatever, relative paths and so on, could actually cause it to behave differently.
I didn't resolve that down beforehand. Huh?
So if you called bin / square bracket, it would act as test. Whereas if you called it just square bracket, it would act as the version for shell scripting, which is different. And so then it says, so there's actually another set of names each binary can go by, both the full path and the base name, and then the name you invoked it with, and then the name it thinks it's called. And it could actually, the name it's called as could actually be null. So that probably counts as something else, right?
Right, another edge case. Oh, man.
It's like, how does this even, it's like, this is complicated, and all we're doing is naming the programs.
Right? We haven't even done anything useful yet.
And so then it goes on to talk about, in all the BSDs, there's __ prog name, which is basically a global variable provided by libc that tells you what's the name of the program you're running. And you can see here, if you call grep or egrep with no options, it prints out the usage message, and the message changes based on what version you called it as.
Sure.
But then he makes a symlink to Signify called Gorilla. And then when you run it, you see the different options. He's like, is that helpful? Probably not. But using the prog name in usage was a prevailing style for a long time. So he copied it when he wrote it. And, some newer programs he's written, he also just had hard-coded names. For example, if you symlink doas to banana and run it, the usage message still comes out as doas instead of banana.
Sure.
And then he looks at, even X programs. If you call xcalc, but using the name abacus, the window still has the title calculator. But if you call it from the command line and give it weird options, it actually prints out its usage message. And if you call it xcalc, it says xcalc. But if you call it /abacus, the usage message actually shows /abacus, not just abacus. So it's obviously not using base name on the argv.
Yeah, so the X Windows obviously gets its title from elsewhere, which is hard set. I can see why originally back in the day they did it this way, though, because renaming a program was just a matter of changing the install location. Right.
Well, and also
this is now
and it makes sense. For example, in the MD5/SHA-256 tool, where you're changing what algorithm you call based on the name, you kind of expect the usage message to say the tool you're running, not some other hashing algorithm, right?
Yeah.
It's like I ran SHA-512 and got the usage message for ripe MD160.
Then you're really confused, right?
So then he talks about, so what's the problem with all this? Should a program that is otherwise name agnostic print its original name, or what the user picked for it? And so on. And then he shows problems you can have with the code when you start using prog name, and you have to make sure that it's not something user provided that can contain evil things and all that. And then he said there's also getters and setters for it now, right? There's get prog name, and it makes a note about some of those dangers, and then it is a user supplied string, don't trust it in a security context, and so on. But all the error messages in libc use it by default and are constructed with multiple iterations of snprintf. One wrong format string and things go bad. Maybe that's not a big risk, but, avoid mistakes by avoiding things that can become mistakes. He said another one to note is that syslog by default uses the prog name. So a user may be able to evade log monitoring by invoking doas with a different name. So if you changed it to be, SSHD or something, and then maybe the logs that get emailed to you purposely exclude SSHD because you're like, well, I have I'm using Blacklist or whatever to block anybody who's attacking me, so I don't want to see all these error, the bots hammering my SSH server in my log summary or something.
Well, even your eyeballs aren't trained to look
Exactly.
for that, right? You're looking for certain things, and it's like that's one you might just skip right
so
over.
apparently they've fixed that one for doas so that you can't do that by renaming doas. But I know that was an issue with some of the way you, if you're doing very certain configurations with sudo, it's like, oh, you're not allowed to do that. It's like, okay, find some tool I am allowed to do and rename the tool I'm not allowed to do to that name in my home directory or whatever and run it. And oh, look, it works now. Stuff like that. But yeah, Ted says, my current thoughts are that progname is a useful abstraction when flexibility is desired, but that doesn't mean that it should be used all the time. Like a lot of best practices, it started slowly devolving towards cargo cult programming. Yep.
Well, cool. Well, yeah, he makes a good case. I think it's probably time to audit some of those.
In a couple of places, it makes sense to hard code the name instead of using progname.
Yeah, especially anything security related that you're possibly logging.
Well, the syslog one is especially interesting. Something I probably wouldn't have thought of if he had mentioned it.
Hey, that's why you listen to this show, though. You hear about all kinds of new stuff and it makes you aware, and somebody will probably patch it here soon. Okay, well, next up, I know we've talked a little bit about the Google Summer of Code in the past. They had their enrolling time and whatnot, and it looks like they've now announced projects for both FreeBSD and NetBSD. So we have a list of some of those here. And it looks like we've gone through, Allan's added some of the highlights here. But I'll read through this. So it looks like first up is to add SCSI pass-through to CTL, which what that means essentially is you could share an optical drive via iSCSI, which would be cool.
So basically anything that takes direct SCSI commands could be shared that way, which is really cool.
Yeah. And next one is add a USB target mode driver based on CTL, which similarly able to share a USB device via iSCSI, which will be a good one as well. So I guess iSCSI's getting a lot of love this year. That'll be awesome. They're adding an API to link creative dev entries to sysctl nodes.
Yes.
I can see how that would come in handy.
More of our stuff needs to be exposed that way. So
yes, that would be very helpful. So next one, implement Ethernet ring protection switching. So tell me a little bit about that. I'm not quite sure.
So this is sub 50 millisecond protection and recovery for basically when it prevents you from making a loop in a switch when you're connecting a bunch of switches together.
Oops.
Yeah, so it's a ring topology for Ethernet switching at the same time ensuring that there's no loops formed in the Ethernet layer. The goal is for the project is implement the ERPS protocol in FreeBSD so that appliances like pfSense and FreeNAS can be directly plugged into these ERPS networks without having to sit behind a router that will... So it's basically a new kind of networking, and your device needs to support it. Otherwise, it has to be behind some compatibility device, and having FreeBSD support it directly will be great.
That would be fantastic. Okay. Next up is a HD audio device model and a user space for Beehive. So I guess sound support for VMs. Interesting. Okay. That will be very cool, especially as people want to start running desktops and whatnot in it and do things with a sound card. Yeah. Okay, so moving on to NetBSD, it looks like implement ext4FS support read-only mode. So yeah, that'll definitely be handy for people pulling stuff in from Linux. And NPF, so their new PF, and Blacklist D adding a web interface to the two.
That's very interesting.
Interesting to see. Okay, also port U-boot so that it can be compiled on NetBSD.
Yes, hopefully that work will mean it can be compiled on FreeBSD shortly thereafter as well.
Make it portable.
Yep.
Make it portable.
Well, NetBSD's specialty is portability, so I'm sure it'll be fine.
That's true. So I would assume so. And then lastly, of course, split debug symbols for package source builds. That makes a lot of sense as well. So yeah, that's definitely some good projects here, and we wish luck to all the students and mentors. And go on, get on coding here. We want to see some of this. That'll be fun. And if you're doing one of these projects, I'll just put the word out right now. You need to come on here and tell us about it. Like, we would love to hear from your students, mentors. If you're listening, bug your students and be like, hey, come on BSD Now, because we want to hear you talk about the project and just the experience of working with the BSD and Google Summer of Code. I think that would be a lot of fun to talk about. Okay, well, of course, we hadn't had any Ted Yu articles on the show for a while, but this week we get a double dose. We get several of them. So his next entry, we got a LibreSSL, More Vague Promises, which I was a little like, what is that all about? Good title. But then goes into some detail on what's been happening in LibreSSL for a past while, as well as what the future plans are going forward. But I see you got a couple of the pull quotes here, Allan, so I'll go ahead and read those out. But he says, with an eye to the future, what new promises can we make? Some time ago, I joked that we only promised to make a better TLS implementation, not a better TLS. Remains true, but fortunately, there are people working on that too. TLS 1.3 support is on the short-term watch list. The good news is that we may be ahead of the game, having already removed compression. So how much more work can there be? Hey, don't ask that.
Yeah, you never, ever ask that.
Right? We're getting 6 months from now, we're going to be pointing back to that. Anyway, but he continues on. He said, so LibreSSL integrated the draft Cha-Cha 20 Poly 1305 construction from Boring SSL. The IETF has since standardized a slightly different version because if it were the same, it wouldn't be different, of course. So support for standard variant and the beginning of a depreciation for existing code should be landing very shortly. Incidentally, some people got bent out of shape because shipping Cha-Cha 20 meant exposing non-IANA improved numbers to the internet. No promises that won't happen again. Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, good to know.
Until it's a standard, it doesn't have a number, and then it's like, well, how are we supposed to test it in the meantime, right?
Yep.
So.
Yep. Well, good to know. Well, anyway, you should check that out. I definitely I follow the LibreSSL stuff with great interest, so don't break us too badly, but hey, keep pushing it forward. I think it's really cool. I know. I get excited to see updates to it land in FreeBSD over here.
I know there was some work of that happened at the hackathon as well.
Okay. Well, that's good. We'll have to see how that what that shapes up to look like down the road. Okay, so before we go to our interview here in just a moment, of course, we need to mention our first sponsor this week, which is going to be iXsystems, website for that. You should know it by now. You should know it by heart. But we mention it because, new tune-in factor and all that. So, of course, iXsystems.com/BSDNow, where you can go and get in touch with the folks over at iX who will build you a system. And, of course, we did the demo of the FreeNAS Mini XL. I did that a couple weeks back. Yes, it's still running. It's running awesome. I haven't actually had any problems with it whatsoever. It just works. It sends me the update notices in my email, and I update it from time to time, and it just works great. It's running FreeNAS 9.10, so I can't complain. Of course, that's all based on some of the latest and greatest cool little Intel Atom processors they have in there. That whole box, I guess, what did we come up with last week? It was like 57 watts or something.
Yeah, depending on the size of the drives and so on you put in it, it's between like 45 and 60 watts, depending on. But the CPU is only like 17. It's amazing.
It's crazy how efficient they've made this thing, and it's just totally stacked inside and out, and you can, of course, get them all customized too. So if you go to their website, they got a whole bunch of cool stuff up there. So if you're looking for something for the house, of course, a FreeNAS Mini XL, I give it 2 thumbs up. I think it's quite cool. But if you're looking for something beyond maybe a FreeNAS Mini XL, iX happens to build a lot of bigger systems as well. So you can go all the way up to the bad boy TrueNAS boxes. They're all flash TrueNAS boxes, which are pretty stinking cool. And of course, Allan orders servers from them from time to time.
Everything from small things to big things.
Yes, that's right. So, and the cool thing about iX is when you call and talk to them, you're going to speak to a sales engineer who actually is an engineer in the proper sense of the word. They understand the technology.
Yeah.
And when you're talking to them, you don't just say, okay, I want this particular model off the shelf. Maybe that'll work for what I want. No. You do it the other way. You tell them, okay, this is the problem we're trying to solve. So I need a mail server. I need a database. Or I need a
database. I want to host my VMs. I want to make sure I get at least this many IOPS. Then they're like, okay, so these disks will give you this many IOPS, and this cache will mean that it'll be this much faster.
But then they can go beyond that. Like, okay, here's how we're going to help you lay out your RAID Z pool for ZFS, right? Here's how we're going to tune it. Like, how many places even understand the file system? When they sell you the hardware, they're like, I don't know, you putting Linux on it or something? I don't know. Like,
it's like we only support old Linux.
Yeah, only old Linux and only the way they ship it out of the factory, because our sales guys maybe don't know anything about how the configuration happens. Well, the iXsystems is a little bit different. So, of course, we highly recommend it and say you should try it out when you're getting ready to purchase your next server for your business or, of course, a system for your house, because you can get your FreeNAS Mini XL customized too. If you want ZIL or L2 ARC,
you can
put a little SSD
upgrade the RAM, or you can get the 10 gigabit Ethernet cards if you want. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So again, great little system, and iX, of course, running all the latest and greatest Intel processors, including stuff maybe that's a little harder to find. They just managed to get a hold of it.
They managed to get me this very, very specific, second revision model of Haswell CPU. This is like the E3 1276 V3.
Yeah.
So not the 1275. It had to be the 1276. And it's like there's only 2 models out of the entire line of that series that will work for this. And that's the one I want.
See, and I mean, how cool is it? You can actually have a vendor who even speaks that kind of lingo and says, "Oh yeah, we can make that."
Rather than like, you can only have these 3 that we happen to have in stock.
Yeah, we stopped carrying that one 6 months ago. Sorry. No. So definitely, folks, of course, iXsystems.com/BSDNow. Go there and, of course, mention that you heard about it here on BSD Now because they like talking to our watchers and listeners, and I know we would appreciate that. Okay, we're joined today by Sammy with Backtrace, who's here to tell us a bit about that and what they do and all the details. And, of course, we'll get right into that. But before we do, first of all, thanks for being on the show this week, Sammy.
Thank you, guys.
So, of course, since it's your first time here, we got to ask the standard question. So tell us about yourself. How did you first get introduced to and get involved with BSD or Unix in general?
Sure. I was in my early teens at the time, I believe 13 or 14. I had quite an interest in system security, which I would say is a very vocal community. And actually, one of the NetBSD kernel developers called me a noob for using Linux and told me I should check out a BSD. So being the adolescent that I was at the time, I immediately downloaded FreeBSD 4.9 and installed it and fell in love with FreeBSD since then. More specifically, the source code was extremely clean, so it was a joy to really dive into the design and implementation of the system.
So would that be like hashtag Linux shaming or something? Like I'm okay with that.
Not really Linux shaming.
Okay.
All operating systems are special
in their own way.
Some more special. Okay. That was too easy. Sorry. Well, cool.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about yourself before we get too far into this.
Sure. So as I'd mentioned, I got involved with FreeBSD around 4.9. At the time, I did a fair amount of work around ports. So I was the guy who created the Arabic ports category. So all 3 FreeBSD Arabic speakers out there, you can thank me for that. And I did some minor work with Trusted BSD. I had the pleasure of working with Robert Watson and CSJP on some minor Mac work, as well as Will Andrews, who's now part of Backtrace on various other porting work. Also ported the NV clock, which is NVIDIA overclocking tool to FreeBSD at the time. So since then, I actually developed an interest in high performance computing. So how do you scale things vertically? These days, everybody's focused on scaling horizontally. And so pretty much for the last decade, that's what I've been focusing on. So high performance computing for across the full gradient of server workloads, from IO bound to compute bound workloads.
Okay. Oh, that's very cool. So I guess what we introduced you with was Backtrace, and of course Backtrace.io. So explain to us what that is. What is going on over at that site?
Sure. So Backtrace is a company that is aiming to improve how software is built, shipped, and maintained. And our thesis is a first step to doing that is improving the postmortem debugging process. So today, a lot of investments have been made on tracing technologies, so dtrace, a whole bunch of stuff that's happening on Linux now. But really, symbolic debugging has been neglected for the last 20 years. So since Steve Bourne wrote ADB, not much has really changed in that space. So today, we have a platform which consists of a set of very high performance debuggers, which are invoked when applications fails or when core dumps are generated. And these tools will analyze the state of the application at the time of fault to extract as many clues as possible to get ops and engineers a head start on root cause. We generate a concise version of those snapshots and send them over to a centralized object store. So now ops folks and engineers have a centralized console where all their faults are coming in. This object store can take automated action in response to these events. So for example, if there's a crash that no one has ever seen before, perhaps a Jira ticket should be created.
Sure.
If there's potential malware in the process image, you should probably notify the security team, etc. And what we're working towards the object store now is actually turning that into more of a distributed debugger of sorts, so you could actually issue deep queries on the state of processes. I do have actually a demo set up that I'd be happy to share. I could actually pull some of the FreeBSD kernel panics that we've seen in the wild.
That would be cool.
Sure.
Is that something you can show us actually live right now? You have the capability to do that. Okay.
So let me begin with the web console. This is live production data for one of our customers. And what you have here is a list of all their faults. So these are, explicit panics, page faults, etc. So for example, if we look at this particular fault right here, we see that it occurred 70 times. The fault occurred 2 hours ago, and it affected 65 hosts. In this particular case, the type of fault was fatal, and we use portions of the call stack in order to group them. So we do generate this signature. And then you'll also note we have a bunch of classifiers here. So our debuggers will do things like look at the faulting instruction and try to highlight interesting architectural constraint violations, point out aliases automatically. So typically today, if you get something like a core dump, it's up to the developer to manually chase down all aliases to the fault address across all threads, which is not exactly tenable. So we automate that process. And once I dive into when I actually download one of these snapshots, you'll see that we also detected an invalid pointer. So we have integration into the FreeBSD kernel UMA allocator. We also have integration into JMalloc 3x, JMalloc 4x, and all versions of ptmalloc, which ship with glibc, not exactly relevant for FreeBSD. And we could highlight all sorts of interesting things. So in this case, an invalid pointer means that we detected a pointer which is backed by a pointer of a particular type is backed by a region of memory which has insufficient size for that type. So we'll go ahead and add an annotation for that. And we could actually, you have a bunch of key values here, so you can see, okay, what data centers are affected, what disk models, I won't dive into that, what versions of FreeBSD, etc. And we could actually drill down into here. So you're greeted by a jitter plot by default. This gives you an idea of just a distribution of faults. Every one of these boxes here is actually a snapshot, which we could pull down. And I'll go ahead and do that shortly. And then you could factor this out. So let's say you want to break down by data center, for example, to see whether there are interesting patterns. You could also get a line chart, which could also be factored out if you want to see interesting patterns, as well as a heat map. Maybe there's a particular day of the week or hour of the day this occurs. In this case, this particular fault is related to faulty hardware, so it's fairly all over the place. And then you could filter on all these. So for example, give me all faults which involve a call stack and that has VOP setter, and you could go ahead and filter on that. You could also filter on classifiers. So give me all double free conditions you found in the wild, etc. So you could filter on all of this. So for example, give me everything in the BSD project sorted by recency that has a double free condition. And that is exposed via the command line as well. And we could actually pull down one of these snapshots. So I'll go ahead and do that. So this is a snapshot. I can't really, the source code here is not exactly the code that this customer is using. So up here you have the list of all the threads. Faulting threads have an F marked. You have the call stacks. In this case, the things in yellow are what we deemed relevant for the signature. You have the variables for the currently highlighted frame, and then down here you have the source code. Again, there's not a one-to-one correspondence here between this core dump and the source code. However, we can be configured to pull the right version of source code. So again, we can't show you this customer's particular code. Classifiers. So over here we detected a double free condition, we detected an invalid read, and we also added a page fault classifier. You could attach directory trees. In this case, we just attached dmessage. Global variables not enabled for this customer. Memory map information. So we do things like serialize all PTEs. And later in the interview, we could talk about some of the work we did with libkvm. But for this particular customer using libkvm, it would take over 2 minutes to generate a simple backtrace. With the various optimizations we made with libkvm, we actually brought that down to less than a second.
Yeah, that's quite an order of magnitude. So.
Yep. A whole bunch of interesting process information. So over here you see a whole bunch of information regarding UMA, register state for every frame, source code, warning. So for example, over here I'm highlighting this warning, and we see SK proc is backed by 256 byte allocation, which is insufficient for pointer to struct proc. We also detected a double free condition. So this has been happening quite often, actually. So selected DR is actually a pointer to a freed region of memory, which is 64 bytes. And we actually detected that this particular entry is present on multiple free lists. And when I talk about UMA integration, by the way, so any variable which is backed by UMA, we will go ahead and display allocation information for. So the slab, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that is the gist of the product. There's much more to it, but I know we are limited on time.
Sure. Well, I'm sure if you go to the website, you can find a lot more detail, right?
Yep.
Okay. Very cool. So, I mean, obviously, as you guys are developing some of this, what are some of the shortcomings you're trying to overcome of, like, say, the current tools and processes? I mean, how can things be improved?
Sure. So debugging obviously is a massive field, and we do have it crosses over into performance, it crosses over into tracing, and we actually do have active plans to tackle those. But right now we're focusing on symbolic debugging. And the biggest problems today are, one, the formats involved. So core dumps are not self-contained, and core dumps are not structured in a manner that really allows for collaboration and allows for indexing at scale. So if you're getting thousands of core dumps a month, you want to be sure that you can index that data in a way that matters. In addition to that, a major limitation today is a debugger is only as effective as the engineer behind it, right? So if you have a memory corruption issue, ultimately the best person to solve that issue, maybe someone that's very familiar with that particular piece of code or very familiar with memory allocator internals, or if you have some kind of misuse of an underlying CPU instruction, someone who's very familiar with underlying architecture would be best suited for that. So what we're focusing on now is actually bringing domain expertise to all engineers. So if you were to have, a domain expert in memory allocators, what are the steps they would take in order to extract all the clues to point engineers to root cause? How do you make every single failure count? And that's what we're focusing on today.
Cool. I wonder, that'd be interesting integrating that with Colin Percival's tool that collects crash dumps from anybody who's willing to submit it.
Yeah, it would be. One thing we are actually working towards, we're working with Sean right now on getting Backtrace integrated with the FreeBSD Jenkins test cluster. Make sure that any faults there are aggregated, and all FreeBSD.org developers will have free access to the platform.
Cool.
Nice.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about why you wanted to start the company in the first place?
Sure. I mean, essentially, this is a huge problem, and no one out there is actually working on it. A lot of folks are focused on metrics, analytics, etc., which is great, but no one's really focusing on improving the technology, which will directly help engineers get to the root cause in the cases where they do have panics, or they do have very hairy performance issues. So we saw this huge market gap and this huge opportunity, and we hope we could really reinvigorate this area with our work. And there are a lot of challenges there. So a lot of the tool chain stuff that has been developed hasn't really focused on performance, hasn't really been focused on utilizing modern features of hardware today. So we've actually ended up having to develop almost everything from scratch. Even libunwine we had to throw away recently. We had major limitations there. So our debugging tech is built from the ground up for this very purpose. Our object store is also built from the ground up. To give you guys an idea, one of our customers, their typical workload is 50K plus threads and 500 gigs of RSS.
Sure.
It took them over 20 minutes to get a simple backtrace with GDB. With us, it takes 2 to 3 seconds if they serialize a subset of threads, and it takes up to 2 minutes if they decide to serialize everything. So we've made huge investments there. And the reason we've done that is we need those spare cycles in order to do all this automated analysis.
Sure. Right. Well, I guess you kind of answered the next question about if there was any customer stories you could share with us. But that were anything else that comes to mind? Any other use cases?
We will be sharing a lot of the FreeBSD use cases soon.
Okay, cool.
But I would say our largest integrations today are actually with FreeBSD based companies.
Okay.
So you talked a little bit about your relationship with FreeBSD personally, as starting as working on ports and so on. But you can tell us what other stuff you've done with FreeBSD?
Sure. So as I had mentioned, we did a fair amount of work with libkvm. We would like to open source to upstream those issues. So hopefully Will Andrews will be working towards that soon. And we will be open sourcing our libunwind patches, even though we don't use libunwind anymore. And we hope to continue contributing to the FreeBSD community.
Cool.
All right, nice. So why did you decide to prioritize FreeBSD? Maybe what was the reasoning behind that?
There clearly was a demand for it. FreeBSD developers care about stability and care about quality. We think culturally there's just a lot of alignment there. And it's also, very, a very, how can I say, competent and well-knit community. So really it's the perfect platform for us to develop and innovate in this area.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what are some of the other reasons maybe that this will be very attractive to FreeBSD users and companies using FreeBSD?
FreeBSD is a first-class platform for us. It comes first. We have very rich support, and we'll continue having very rich support for it, both kernel space and user space. Nice. So if you care about stability and you care about observability, it's the product is a great fit for that.
Cool. Okay. So, of course, we heard you mention you're integrating with the FreeBSD test cluster. So why would that be interesting to people? What's happening there?
The hope is that FreeBSD developers will be able to get to the root cause of these panics much more quickly, and you'll have a catalog of all these faults to make sure that you can actually build a process around them, which is extremely important.
Yeah, and if we catching them when they're in the Jenkins cluster before they get shipped in a release will obviously make everybody's life much better, right?
Right, and being able to point out. So actually, I didn't point this out in the fault, but for example, in the fault that I pulled up, you actually had multiple threads aliasing the faulting address. We pointed out the heap corruption issues. These are all crucial clues which give engineers a head start on root cause.
So we also heard that you'll be sponsoring, or Backtrace will be sponsoring BSDCan this year. Does that mean you'll be attending?
Yeah, we will be there. We will have a sponsor table with a live demo that everyone can play with. So yeah, come on by, and we're excited to be there.
Yeah, after just the short preview we saw there, it'd be fun to get to play with that.
Yeah, that'd be neat to see in person.
Yeah, actually, and we will be bringing that to the web browser. So we are working on that today, so you get the benefits of modern graphics.
So I know we talked a little bit beforehand, but tell us a little bit about Concurrency Kit, something else you've worked on.
Sure. So Concurrency Kit essentially brings a concurrent memory model to C99 and provides a whole bunch of technologies for implementing high-performance concurrent and parallel systems. To give you the backstory there, many years ago, I was part of the GW High Performance Computing Laboratory in Washington, D.C., and we were invited over to the Arctic Region Supercomputing Center because they had just purchased a new supercomputer where they went from supercomputer with quotes. They went from 4-node machines to 8-socket machines, and they were confused as to why their 8-socket machines were not performing well. And that ended up becoming a rabbit hole of research and scalable synchronization. And what I found at the time is there was no library out there which really provided the granularity of atomics that I wanted, no library or reference implementations out there for scalable synchronization primitives, so scalable spin lock, scalable asymmetric synchronization primitives, whether it is safe memory reclamation schemes or read-write locks out there. And really, this is how Concurrency Kit was born. It has a very nice user base. It's used in some fairly mission-critical environments. These days, it's primarily developed by myself and FreeBSD's own Olivier Cognet at FreeBSD. And we have a lot of cool stuff in there. Anything from, we have, for example, a non-blocking hash table that does not require any single writer, many reader, that doesn't require any atomic operations or memory barriers on the fast path. Yet it still provides fully non-blocking progress guarantees. So it scales linearly for readers. And to give you an idea, the fast path for a read workload is, it's twice as fast as Google Dense Hash. So yeah, check it out. It's BSD licensed.
Oh, perfect.
Contributors and users are always welcome.
Cool.
Concurrencykit.org.
Nice. So back to Backtrace, I guess. So we saw the little demo you gave us, and you mentioned that we'll be able to kind of get our hands on playing with it at BSDCan, but can people get like a demo version of Backtrace?
Sure. So head on to backtrace.io. There's a huge button on there that says sign up for a free trial. Click on that and you're good to go. I would also recommend reading our blogs. We have a lot of interesting posts on there, ranging from malware detection to FreeBSD related topics to concurrency. Okay. A lot of these techniques we also apply internally.
Cool. Nice. Well, cool. This has been fantastic. Is there anything else you want to tease us with before you go? Get us all excited to go to BSDCan and see this in person?
Just hop on by. We're excited to show you guys what we've built. We have, again, a lot of big things planned at the moment.
Okay. Cool. Well, we'll have to check in with you down the road and see what those are.
We'll tweet it.
Okay.
Yep.
Very cool. Well, great. Well, we appreciate you coming on the show today, Sammy. It's been excellent.
Thank you guys a lot.
Hope you guys enjoyed the interview with Sammy. That was a lot of fun. Of course, hey, another reason why you need to come to BSDCan this year and see some of this cool stuff in person. I mean, aside from all the awesome stuff that happens there, but just one more thing to look forward to. I guess June can't come soon enough this year. Okay, well, we got to get into the news roundup. But before we do, of course, another sponsor this week is going to be DigitalOcean. And again, longtime listeners know this by now, but DigitalOcean.com for you newcomers. So if you're a newcomer, never visited the site before, it's really, really cool. You just go there, you create an account, and in about a little under 60 seconds or so, you can spin up a FreeBSD VM up in the cloud, and it's just living wherever you want it to. So they have data centers all around the world, of course. We've talked about the locations before. See, we got New York and London and Singapore and Toronto, and I'm trying to think, was there Germany as well?
Germany, England, Singapore, and San Francisco.
San Francisco, okay. Yep, I knew I was missing one there. And that we talked about there was a new one coming to
India. Yep.
India is where the new one's coming soon. So on the website, it's really nice. They even have little tools that let you ping and test connectivity to those different sites. So you can use that appropriately when you're planning where you want to spin up the VM. But once you're all ready to go, don't forget, of course, the coupon code FreeBSDNow. If you have a brand new account and you've not used another coupon code yet, that'll let you spin it up and give you a $10 credit, which is good for running 2 months of their lower end $5 VM, which is a great way to try it out, see if it works for you, and just mess around with it. And of course, that VM is still backed by SSDs, so it's pretty awesome and pretty fast, and a terabyte a month of traffic, which you can't beat that. I mean, that's a good deal for $5 a month. So definitely check them out today. And of course, we've talked about their tutorials and FAQs. They got a lot of great stuff on the site. So highly recommend it. Check it out. And I know we use it. Allan uses it for some things for Scale Engine. I use it here for some work stuff. So it's definitely very handy to be able to spin one up like that, just in New York in my case. Come on, guys. Got to get into Atlanta data center. Yes. I'm begging you, maybe at some point, right? But New York's not so bad. The ping time's still only like 40 milliseconds, so it's very good. But of course, check it out again, DigitalOcean.com. Okay, so let's head right into the news roundup. So first up, we got systrace has been removed for OpenBSD 6.0. Okay, so you're asking, well, why does that matter? Okay, so OpenBSD's systrace was an older mechanism for limiting maybe what syscalls an application can make, which of course at this point is a little kind of crufty and redundant.
Yeah, basically, it turned out not to work quite so well. In particular, programs often needed to do special system calls at startup and then not need them anymore. And so something like pledge or capsicum, where instead of limiting it outright, you're just you say, all right, do your startup, get done, and now you can drop it. That lets you be a lot more restrictive, because if you restrict everything, then the program doesn't work.
Yeah. So definitely it's neat to see that they're culling that out. I guess OpenBSD was the very first implementation, but most of the others that have been around have been maintained for some time now. I guess the last Linux version was for 2.61. NetBSD removed it back in 2007, so that's good that they're kicking that out, especially since you got Pledge now. It doesn't make a lot of sense to keep that old cruft around. Okay, so next up we have a pfSense video series, a comprehensive guide to 2.3. It looks like we have a nice YouTube playlist here.
There's 11 videos already, and there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plus hours of content at least.
Basically everything you ever wanted to or could know about pfSense in 6 hours.
Yeah, so it covers up first starting why you would use pfSense, and it talks about what the problems are with those $60 boxes you buy at the store, and so on, and then how to pick your hardware, how to do the installation. Then it has a video that goes just into the details of basics of networking that you kind of need to understand before you go about actually configuring your pfSense. And then there's a comprehensive tour of the web UI that goes on for quite a while, because there's so much in there. Then it goes on to talk about how to set up graphing and RRD, how to back up and restore your configuration. And then it even goes into setting up, running a DHCP server, running a time server, setting up DNS, like a recursive resolver and everything, and the whole set. And I'm sure there'll be even more videos coming. So that's a playlist you need to bookmark, keep your eye on, basically going forward. So yeah, that's really cool. So now are the guys over at pfSense actually making this? Or is this I think this is just a user. It's just on a personal YouTube account, so I don't know.
Well, hey, still, that's some dedication. That's really awesome. So check that out today. If you've ever run pfSense, or if you want to, this may be the thing that tips you over and makes you go ahead and get that installed and set up. But very cool. Okay, so next, of course, DuckDuckGo. Not a site we've mentioned a whole lot here on the show, though I'm sure a lot of our listeners are familiar with it, the search engine, the privacy first search engine. But they've announced their donations for 2016 for the FOSS donations that they're doing. So, of course, the theme is going to be raising the standard of trust online, which is a good thing. And they announced some of their supported projects, which, of course, this year includes the OpenBSD Foundation. DuckDuckGo is going to be a gold sponsor this year. So that's definitely good to see them supporting that.
Yeah, they gave $25,000 each to the list of projects here, including OpenBSD, the Freedom of the Press Foundation, which is making Secure Drop, which is a way for people to anonymously, like whistleblowers, to submit information such that they can't be traced and found and injured. The Freenet project, which is kind of like an alternative to Tor. The OpenBSD Foundation. The CryptTech project, which is more about open source hardware cryptographic engines, because sure, having good cryptographic software is great, but not if the hardware is kleptographic or evil in some way. So actually having hardware you can trust to run your good crypto code on top of.
Definitely. And of course, the actual Tor project itself was on the list here.
For their onion services.
Fight for the Future, for safe security, open source technology improvement fund for VeraCrypt, which is based on TrueCrypt. It's good to see. And then Rise Up Labs for Leap, which is the Leap Encrypted Access Protocol. And GPG Tools for GPG Mail. Wow, did stumble over that one. But yep, they're sponsoring them as well. So that's good to see.
An extension for Apple Mail to allow you to use GPG, because the more people that can do that, the better.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, great. Keep up the good work. And I love seeing those kind of donations happen. Of course, these open source projects need those. I mean, just because it's open source and you get it for free doesn't mean it doesn't cost somebody something. There's servers to pay bills for, and hardware and time and effort. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into making an open source project like this. So course, we encourage folks to support them in any way they can. Okay, so last up here, it's a little bit of a sad note here, but we want to let you know that Larry the BSD Guy is hanging up his hat over at Phosphorus. So, of course, Larry, the recently renamed BSD Guy, has decided to hang it up. He's walking off into the sunset, figuratively, of course. So he actually wrapped up some coverage of the recent Linux Fest Northwest, which he didn't actually attend, but, I mean, he may as well. The write-up was pretty good on it. But he decided it's time for a change, and he's giving up his column over at Phosphorus, as well as stepping away from all things technical. So time for a change of pace. His last write-up was a good one. He had some really nice plugs for both Drew Levine and Michael Dexter of the BSD communities, who both went to Linux Fest Northwest and gave excellent talks, I've heard. So that's good. But, of course, we just want to wish him the best. We know he's going to be missed, so we wish him all the luck with the future. And towards the end of his last article, he also puts out that they're going to be looking for a new columnist over at Phosphorus here in the near future. So if that's something you'd like to kind of take on the mantle for, he has the contact information all right in there. So definitely check it out. Maybe you can be the next, of course, we need to have a BSD guy or gal.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
We need to make that happen. So yes, our listeners, put your bid in now. Maybe you can get a hold of that.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a ton of Beastie bits to get to today. I mean, there's almost a whole nother show's worth. But hey, we're gonna slog through them all. Make sure we get them all in this week, because of course they kind of caught up with us since you were out of town this last week, Allan. But hey, that's good. More for you guys. But before we get into that, of course, Tarsnap. Now we need to mention them. They're the last sponsor this week. So website, tarsnap.com/BSDNow. Again, pretty simple. You should be able to remember that if you're driving. Just wait till you get to where you're going and then look it up. Okay, let's be safe. But when you get there, you need to make sure your backups are done. I'm talking everything. So your desktops, your systems, maybe you got a FreeNAS box you need to back up some bits on that on, etc. Even Linux boxes, and maybe we'll even let you do it on Windows too, right? Turns out they got binaries for everything up on the website. So if you need to do encrypted backups, Tarsnap's going to make it super easy, super cheap, and super simple. And not only that, it's open. If you want to go grab the source code and audit it yourself to verify it lives up to its claims, which are that anything that you send out over the wire is already encrypted and only encrypted with your key that you have, not the guy on the remote end.
And no one else has your key, so don't lose the key, because then all your stuff is gone. That's the whole point. If you decide you want all of your stuff to go away, it's up in the cloud, and there's how many copies of it. Even if you tried to even if Colin tried to erase it, he would never be sure that he got all the copies. But if you take your copy of the key and destroy it, then it's gone. No one can ever read the data.
So that's a feature, not a bug, by the way. So don't complain if you lost your key. But that's how it's supposed to be. Only you have access to it. Think of it as the ultimate lockbox that nobody can forge your key on and get in. So definitely check it out, folks. And, of course, when they measure the cost in picobyte dollars per month, I mean, it's dirt cheap. Put $20 in there. You'll be surprised how long that lasts you. So and definitely.
The other thing is that you only pay for the encoded bytes, which means after deduplication, after compression, and after the encryption. So, so even if you're backing up more, if it's compressible, you only pay for the less bits.
That's right. So, no monkey business going on with like overbilling you, even though he's really deduping it 20 times.
All kinds of money on it.
None of that.
It was interesting. Colin was talking about how he could have built Bitcoin in his sleep because all the Satoshi Nakamoto stuff going on or whatever. And then, so that made me think, it's like, well, if we had Colin coin, it would be measured in some kind of like pico dollars per memory byte month.
Well, just let me know if you make one, Colin, and I need to start doing the mining early.
So I get lots of
cash out and buy a nice house. Please let me in on that early before it all gets mined out.
If I kept my coins that I did early on, because the price went up to like 30 and then went back down to 5 and I sold then. And then they went down to $1 and I was like, And then it's like, if I had 40 coins when they're worth $1,000 each, then.
a whole nother story, right?
Yeah.
Right, I know. What if? Yep. Anyway.
Moving on.
But moving on. Check it out again, guys. tarsnap.com/BSDNow. Okay, so Beastie Mitts here. So first of all, if you've sponsored the FreeBSD Mastery Advanced ZFS book, you need to check your mailbox. There may be a prize waiting for you now.
Yes. So those shipped out. I know Dan got his, and a couple other people have gotten theirs. And I got my copy in the mail.
No,
Yes.
it's coming soon.
Yep.
It's coming soon. This is awesome. It's Christmas in May.
Yep.
So-
And if you didn't sponsor it and would like a copy, you can go to zfsbook.com and order yours. It's available.
Or you can be like me and wait till Canada, buy a copy in person so I can get it signed.
Yes.
That's more special to me.
Well, he can only bring so many copies. So, if you want to buy your own copy and then bring it with you, that works too.
That does work too.
Yes.
Yeah. So if anybody gets there, you leave a copy for me. Don't take them all. Wait till I get mine. So,
Yes.
yeah, that's excellent. Well, cool. Good job, guys. I'll look forward to reading that here next month. Okay, so next up, we had a post on the mailing list talking about PKG 1.70 being an order of magnitude slower than PKG 1.64, and it was caused by a problem not in PKG. So what was the analysis on that?
So
what actually caused it?
there's an errata notice that went out for 10.3 probably today that explains. But basically, when you save files that are hashed like etc services or login.conf and a couple other ones, or specifically the password database, it was syncing every, even on opening and closing the file, even if you're only reading it, it was calling sync. And basically it was doing all synchronous writes being really, really slow, whereas you can do all the writes and then just sync at the end, and it's a lot faster. And so, that was a bit of a bug there to make sure that the files don't get corrupted, but they went too far and made it horribly imperformant. So it's been fixed now. It's been fixed in head for a while, but the errata notice for 10 went out along with the security updates for OpenSSL today. So once you get that update installed, then you will no longer have horrible performance.
Okay,
so it was package was just exposing the problem, not actually causing the problem.
Okay, excellent. So next up, I know we mentioned Linux Fest Northwest earlier, and we were talking about Larry, but we have a recap posted here, it looks like, up at iXsystems blog, which looks pretty cool. And then I know part of it was Drew from iX and also Michael Dexter did a talk.
Yep, and then Michael Dexter actually did a second talk. He did Larry Kafiro's talk because he didn't end up making it to Linux Fest. He had a family emergency or something at the last minute and had to bail out.
Okay, well, hey, that happened.
Yes, and Jupiter Broadcasting, the network that runs this show, was there as well, and they had a booth and they were doing their crazy Linux thing. But also our producer, JT, was there at Linux Fest and talking to people about BSD.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's a good one. Yeah, I'm sorry I missed it this year, but I think that's definitely been a good conference in the past.
Other nice thing is they have videos this year. So if you didn't get to see Drew's talk yet, Talk Like an Egyptian, they have video of it up on their website.
Does she play the song?
I don't know.
Copyright reasons. That would be cool, Drew.
But yes, all the talks, there's links to all the talks in the show notes if you want to check them out.
Okay. So next up, we have a January issue of the FreeBSD Journal is now online for free, so you'll want to check that out.
Yeah, so if you've never been able to decide if you wanted to subscribe and pay for the FreeBSD Journal, they gave the January edition away for free again this year, like they did last year. And so you can check it out and decide if it's for you. It definitely is. So
the answer is yes. We filled that out for you.
But it's $19.99 for the 6 issues of each year, or you can buy a single issue for $7, but you're much better off just getting the subscription.
Yeah. Just get it and be done with it. Cool.
Yeah, and they've announced the topics for the upcoming issues as well. So while the March-April issue that we talked about 2 weeks ago, I think, was about academia and teaching with BSD, May-June will be about ports. July and August will be about CDN. So I'll be writing an article for that one.
Yep.
And then September and October will obviously focus on FreeBSD 11, which will come out in that time frame. And then the December issue will be about computer languages on FreeBSD. All the new stuff. I know Swift is coming now, right? And people are doing a lot of stuff with Go and all the other interesting things going on there.
Sounds neat. Sounds neat.
Well, if those topics interest you, definitely check out getting a copy. So you can get it from all the different app stores to read on your regular, your fancy devices, or there is the desktop edition, they call it, where you can actually just watch it in a web browser, and that works on BSD or any other. It just requires a web browser, nothing fancy.
Yes. Yep. Which I'm sure everyone has access to one of those.
Yes.
Come on.
I'm sure you have a web browser.
That's right. Okay, so next up, GhostBSD has released 10.3 Alpha 1 for testing. So if you've not played around with GhostBSD, maybe now is the time to try that out. A couple things that are new about it. It now supports ZFS in addition to UFS, and it supports encryption for ZFS, which is good.
Installer.
And it looks like they're going to try and update quarterly as well, so you'll have a little bit more stability, but it'll still be able to change, upgrade to later versions of software. So some various bug fixes. Looks like new mate, new grub theme. A few other things. So definitely check it out if you've not tried that.
If you're really into GNOME, that's a good thing to do.
That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it. Okay, moving on. EuroBSD. So the call for papers, the deadline is May 8th. Yep. So we're recording this right now on the 4th. You might be watching it
come out on the 5th or 6th. So it means you literally have to, this episode's almost over. It's got a couple of minutes to finish this episode, and then you need to go and write your paper.
Yes,
that's right. The proposal only needs to be, they want like 100 words or something. It's not that hard.
No, not at all.
It's not like Tokyo where I wrote 10 pages.
No, Tokyo is always the long one.
Well,
everything else is easy.
You only need an abstract to actually send them. Like you only need like 1 or 2 pages to get accepted. But I usually try to write the whole thing just because that way I know it's done in time for the conference. Cause
that's true.
Nothing worse
that's
than
what I've done too in the past. I just write it and submit the whole paper up.
Yeah,
like this is what I would submit. Is this okay?
Yeah, because it's mostly for me. It's if something comes up, I don't want to end up not having enough of a paper, and I'm accepted and I'm expected to show up, and also unlike other conferences, you have to have it done well before the conference because they need it to print it in the book,
which is unique.
Yes,
okay, cool. But this weekend, basically, no more delaying. Just get the lead out, man. It's time to get your paper done for EuroBSDCon and get that submitted. And hopefully in a future episode here in the next month or so, a couple of weeks, however long it takes, we'll be announcing that you're going to that.
Yes,
and
we'll have the schedule and getting people all excited about that.
Yeah, that's going to be some good stuff. Okay, so next up, we had just a recap posted here about the local Knox bug we did, local to me anyway. Out here in Knoxville, Tennessee area. So it went really, really well. We have a link to the website here where there's kind of a recap written up there. I spoke and gave kind of a demo, or not so much a demo as a preview of PCBSD 11 and all the new fun stuff that's happening in FreeBSD 11 and our toolchain, etc. So it was a great time. We actually had a good turnout. We had about 15 people there, and I know there was another 3 or 4 that wanted to come, which for a first meeting I thought was fantastic, considering I was expecting like 8 or 9. So I think we exceeded expectations, and we met at the Blount County Library, which was a great venue for that. So looking forward to next month. It looks like Drew Levine's going to be speaking, coming out here for that. So definitely go to the website. If you're anywhere close to Knoxville or can drive there and like to be a part of a BSD users group, this will be the event for you. We would love to see you.
Yeah, I wish it was close enough for me to go.
I know, right? It's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
I've always pictured having one out here, and we did it. We actually had one. So
it's great.
It was a good time. Okay, so what's this last one here? It looks like the Open Source Data Center conference happened.
Yes, so this is the conference.
That was the one you were at.
The conference I was at, and they have the schedule, videos, slides, and photos of everything. So you can actually, see the list of talks.
Record talks
yep, there's videos already on YouTube for every talk.
Perfect.
These guys basically run a series of conferences all year round, so they're all on the ball about that stuff. So there's mine. There's also a great one about Redfish, which is a replacement for the old IPMI system for managing servers. That gives you like a REST API so that you can do things like turn servers on and off and reconfigure their BIOSes and stuff with a nice REST API instead of having to do it manually.
Java?
Yeah. Get rid of some of the... Well, it doesn't actually deal with the actual console thing. That's still mostly Java, although... Supermicro has an HTML5 one now. It's just it'll be out soon. But that was a good talk. There was also some great ones about databases. Like Colin Charles gave tuning Linux for your database, which was more generic tuning stuff, not necessarily specific to Linux. But also Jörg also gave one about replication and clustering in MySQL. So using like Galera cluster from MariaDB. Or versus regular replication, what the differences are and when it's good to use one versus the other, and how to deal with the special aspects that exist in using a cluster. And, if you have a hot row, you want to kind of bias towards one specific server to avoid the rollbacks and so on. But lots of cool stuff. There's overviews of DNS. There was, Puppet, Salt, Chef, everything you want.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yep.
Cool. Well, that's the end of the Beastie Bits for this week. But of course, now we have feedback from you folks out in the audience. So we're going to jump right into that. So first up this week is going to be Muhammad, who has a question about replication. So he says, hi, guys. Love your show. It's an inspiration to me, and I'd like to try out some of the ideas you've shared when I have the time. I know, right? Some of the things even I talk about, I wish I could.
Yes, free time. If I could just give every BSD person a week of free time, imagine the stuff we could come up with.
So the trick is we need more of you guys out in the community to step up and take all these things from us, take them and run with it so we can go work on these other fun things and like so forth and so on. But anyway, I digress. So he said some of the stuff on the show you've shared has been really useful to me personally as well as my day job. So thanks a million. He says, a question. I have recently started using ZXfer to back up client servers, and it's working like a charm. But one of my clients has a bunch of co-located servers in a data center with a committed rated of 25 megabits a second. If they exceed that much, they are billed for the 29 or 95th percentile. Yeah. He said, I didn't know that, and we were hit with some pretty high overage fees. So my question, if I have two data sets that have already been R-synced, would I be able to take a snapshot at the same time on both data sets and resume the replication from there instead of having to start over?
No.
Yeah.
It's not based on snapshot names. It's based on the UUID. So, no. If...
So that was super tricky to get working.
Yeah, well, it doesn't work because the blocks wouldn't be the same. So, pro tips for this one are ZFS has resume support now, so that helps a lot. You know, if you are replicating, especially if you're limited on speed, and then it breaks halfway through. You know, you've been replicating for 2 days, and you're at like 90% done, and then the connection hiccups.
Yeah,
has happened to me. Or it's like, I really need to reboot this machine.
Yeah.
Being able to resume is a huge benefit there. Sadly, ZXfer doesn't support resuming yet, at least not automated. It's on my to-do list, but my time is very full at the moment.
Again, time.
I use IPFW and DummyNet to rate limit my replications to solve that problem. Because, I have exactly the same problem, even though my committed rate is 200 megabits. To our storage cluster, we're moving away from that to a different data center to get higher bandwidth because we keep going over that 200 megabits because there's just that much stuff going on now. And it's very problematic for us. But yeah, you can't just forget about rsync.
In a perfect world, maybe, but no.
Things I've learned are try to break your data sets up into smaller pieces. You know, I try to avoid ever having a data set that's more than, a couple hundred gigabytes. And, frequent snapshots so that you can replicate in small chunks. And, yeah.
Okay.
DummyNet or there's ZX...
IPFW DummyNet. It's actually a lot easier to set up than you think.
Yep, and then there...
A few lines.
Yeah, there's a few lines. Other one is ZXfer has support for a progress bar program that is pluggable. You can put in whatever one you want. There are a couple that support, rate limiting as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Cool. All right, so next up we have John. He says, I have a few questions regarding ports and packages. I'm using FreeBSD on my desktop and FreeNAS on my server. In fact, you guys talked about my server and build, and he provides the link for that in episode 126. He said, hearing you guys talk about pooDriver so much, I was thinking about setting it up on a low-powered HP 47 or 470 server that I recently acquired when its owner upgraded. First of all, I was wondering what your opinions are, at which use case it makes sense to set up your own repository.
To answer that, only if you're going to customize your packages. Like if you, at Scale Engine, we have quite a few custom options. We compile FFmpeg with some patches. We compile Nginx with some default stuff that's not on by default added, and we use the devel version. And so we checkpoint. The other thing we have to do is we don't use packages until we've tested them, and so we kind of. We're using the head tree, not the stable one, but we only move in lockstep occasionally, right? We don't update our ports tree every day or anything. And so if you need kind of that level of control, then yeah.
Okay. So he was asking if I have only 2 machines, that even makes sense. Like Allan said, not really if you're not customizing things.
If it depends. Basically, if you're going to end up using ports, then maybe it does make sense to use Poudre. You know, it also depends how many packages. You know, if you're dealing with more than 50 packages and you were going to use ports for it instead of package for some reason, then sure. If you only have a couple of ports, probably not. If with just 2 machines, you might consider synth as well, right? Because that's faster.
Yeah. He said, if I set up Poudre on the 400 on the HP, I was wondering if this is too low powered of a machine to run Poudre if I'm not using ZFS. I assume I would need more than the measly 512 megs of RAM.
Yeah.
The server, if I wanted to use ZFS. Anyway, so I was planning on avoiding it. I don't care if it takes a long time to compile packages within reason as long as it works.
Yeah, so synth is probably a decent option there because Poudre, you know, it can work in a lot of systems, but it was really designed for the FreeBSD cluster with large machines to compile all 26,000 ports, right?
I was going to say, though, with 512 megs of RAM, there's a lot of packages you can't build.
Yeah, there are packages you literally cannot build.
Don't do, because he says he's doing a lot of desktop
right,
ones. Don't build Firefox.
Yeah, you can't build Firefox or LibreOffice or anything like that with only 512 megs of RAM. So, but, you know, most of those you don't have to customize,
10
right?
gigs of swap.
Sure, that will finish eventually.
Yes.
But yeah, the big one there is, you know, you're not going to customize your version of Firefox probably. So, you know, if you're not using, if you don't have a strong need for custom options, then just use the regular package repos. They're so much faster and easier.
He said, my only other Poudre-based alternative would be setting it up in a jail on my FreeNAS box. He said this would work, but during my reading, I saw warnings saying not to do this. Maybe you could set up a tutorial. I don't know about
there's a couple things, like, I know in the past it required kernel patches to be able to actually run Poudre in a jail. And there are like certain extra setup steps you had to do. So yeah, I wouldn't.
It was like more trouble than it was worth, though, because I don't think it bought you any security.
No.
Or bypassing all the security anyway. So.
Right, because like Poudre itself is going to do all of its work inside jails anyway. So it's already safe enough. But, you know, in the case of the FreeNAS, that's the only place you can do it, though, right?
Yep. He said, say I were not to set up Poudre, what's the best alternative? So we talked about synth.
Or just using ports directly. But packages are always the best option unless you really need some weirdness.
Said I heard people talking about you shouldn't mix ports and packages. People have different ideas about the best solution of this.
Now it's less of a big deal. Basically, the reason to not mix ports and packages is they come from very, you know, in the past, they were built on very different dates, right? So if you had an older version and then you tried to sell something from from ports, it would be like, oh, I actually want to update the version that you have of that, and it's going to make a mess. Or, you know, the other way around is you have an older something from ports and you try to install from or you have a newer something from ports, you try to install from packages, and it tries to downgrade something on you, which breaks another dependency, and it gets all kinds of a mess. Now that the packages are built like every 3 days, they're fairly close to what's live in the ports tree. Plus, if you use the quarterly branch, if you get the quarterly branch of the ports tree, then you can easily intermix those with no problem.
System.
It's something we keep talking about, but never got around to. But actually, we'd love to have it so that you could download the ports tree that was used to build the packages in the repo.
You just package add it, like package add port source or something, you know.
Yeah,
that would be really cool. I'm surprised nobody's done that yet. Actually, that seems like it wouldn't.
Well, the metadata file for the ports tree as a package would be ridiculous.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Yeah, okay.
The plist would contain every plist ever.
Yeah, that would suck. That would suck. Okay. Good point. All right, you want to take the next one, Allan? It's not really BSD related, so you're welcome to skip it if you'd like.
It's an interesting question, though. So,
okay, that's why I threw it in. I thought maybe you'd find it fascinating. So go ahead.
Yeah, so you'd ask for an overview of Anycast versus Unicast for DNS, the pros and cons, and when you'd want to use one over the other. He specifically says, I'm wondering if Anycast DNS is worth the small annual cost. You know, Namecheap sells VeriSign service for $4.88, and DNS Made Easy is $29. Is it really more responsive or reliable and responsive? So, kind of yes. Basically, Unicast is your regular internet routing, right? You have an IP address, and there's one particular way for you to get from here to there, and it works. With Anycast, it's kind of a way of cheating. It's basically you broadcast routes to the same address from multiple locations. So there's one IP address, but it's actually on multiple machines in different places. And your ISP basically finds the one that's closest to them, and your traffic goes there. Whereas for someone else, it could go to a different data center. Whereas with unicast, it would always go to one particular data center.
Sure.
And for DNS, this works because it's UDP, so there's no long-lived state. So because routing changes or whatever, which server is closest to you changes, because UDP, it's fine because there's no connection. Whereas if it was TCP, if you were connected to the server and all of a sudden the route changed and it points to a different server, your packets get to that other server and it's like, who are you? We were not talking to each other. We don't have an open connection, and so it could break relatively frequently. But for DNS with Anycast is fine because even if you do fall back to TCP, it's only for a couple of seconds, right? So as far as reliability, it means that if a server goes down and the route goes away, you automatically go to a different one rather than have it being down. And responsiveness, it mostly means that it finds the closest person automatically. Whereas, if you have 3 DNS servers in the US, somebody in Asia is not going to have a fast response from them. Whereas with Anycast, if there's a server in Asia, then they will. He says, I wonder if there's any overhead. Not really. It's basically the same. It's the same as unicast. It's just there's multiple endpoints instead of one. Right. So there's no performance difference between, if you unicast or anycast to the exact same server in the same place would be exactly the same speed.
Sure. Okay.
Yep.
Well, interesting question. Again, not necessarily a BSD one, but still, it was interesting that
more of a question I'd expect on TechSnap than on BSD Now, but yeah.
Yeah, it comes in, we'll take it any way we can get
exactly.
it. So. All right, so you want to grab the next one too, and I'll finish it up?
Yep. So this one is from Bill, and he says, hi guys, thanks for the informative show. He says, I'm a Linux user, new to BSD, and so take my comments with a grain of salt. I rendered a hard drive unusable trying to install FreeBSD and only revived it by setting it as master or as slave in another machine and formatting with Linux. I was later told I would probably because ZFS file system is the default and it doesn't play well with other BIOS machines and legacy MS-DOS partitioning. I don't know that the hard drive was unusable then. I don't know exactly what happened there, but it's usually not a problem. People use
the only case I've heard of that is if you GPT partition. There's some motherboards, we've seen this with PCBSD, where they just refuse to post.
Right.
Like they read the disk and I'm done.
Yeah, the Lenovo's do that, and so I wrote a patch for that. He says, I've tried PCBSD before, but when I try to install it now, it too insists on ZFS and won't allow custom partitioning. Yeah,
Yeah, we're ZFS only, sorry.
Yeah, and in general,
I don't regret that decision in the slightest.
No, it's worth it. He said he found Dragonfly a pain to install as he kept getting not enough room in cache when trying to install XFCE. I don't know. Only when I changed their default size for /var was I able to boot into XFCE, but without Firefox, which was failed for some checksum error. Interesting. He says, I'm now trying GhostBSD with none of the above mentioned problems. I can use most of my favorite Linux programs. It's very smooth, responsive, and stable so far. And they just had the new version come out. So he says, in short, why is GhostBSD not mentioned on your homepage among the other distros? Well, we don't really mention distros usually. The GhostBSD and PCBSD are really just kind of spins of FreeBSD. It's not quite the same as distros like in Linux. It's kind of a little different.
Yeah, it's just kind of.
Although some of them are
news
a little
in popularity. It depends on what questions come in and determines how often we mention something.
Yeah, I meet very few people who don't want to use ZFS.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
I'm sorry you had a partitioning problem, but I wouldn't blame ZFS, and I would consider trying ZFS again because it's worth it.
Yeah, ZFS will change your life. When you actually get it working and start using it, it's going to be pretty incredible.
Usually there's no difficulty in getting it working. I'm sorry you're having trouble there.
Yeah. So if you try the PCBSD and let it do its ZFS thing, and if you say it won't allow my partitioning, I'd be curious to know what your partitioning was. Just out of curiosity, is this some like crazy quad booted machine with a gazillion extended partitions and different? Yeah. I mean, we run into that from time to time. But if there's something somewhat generic you're trying to do, let me know. Maybe we can fix that. Okay. Well, last up we have Charles who writes in. He says, "Hey, I just realized nobody mentioned any conference videos from Asia BSDCon, and nobody's put anything up on YouTube. Does putting up videos cut into attendance?"
No, it's just that
I haven't heard of that.
No, I remember one conference organizer saying that, but no, that's not the problem. It's just it's all volunteer team, unlike, the NetWays conference I was just at, where it's a team of people that get paid to do it, and they run a bunch of conferences. Asia BSDCon is organized by volunteers, and they only have so much time, and they haven't got around to editing and posting all the videos yet.
Sure.
Hopefully, in a couple more weeks, they'll be up.
Yeah, so it'll happen. Give it time. And
we were told it should be faster. We were told it should be faster than last year because they recorded on SD cards instead of tape that would have to be converted first. So the files should be in a format much easier to work with. So hopefully, not too much longer, and we'll have those.
Cool. Okay. Well, we hope that answered the question, Charles. Yep. Well, great. Well, as we wrap up the show here, folks, first of all, it's been a great show, and we're glad you made it back safe, Allan, from Europe. And I guess we're both going to be in the rest of the month. So we have a kind of normal month for once, which is good.
Still need more interviews, though.
We do. So if you know somebody who needs to be interviewed, or you yourself want to be interviewed, send us a message right now to feedback@bsdnow.tv. We would appreciate that because, of course, we'd love to get you on the show. I know I kind of mentioned it earlier, too. We were talking about the Google Summer of Code. I really mean that.
Yes.
If you're a Google Summer of Code student or a mentor, maybe if your student's a little shy and doesn't want to come on here, well, hey, mentor, you come on here with them. Or you guys, we can tag team it. We don't mind doing that. It's Skype. We can set it up any way you want.
Yep.
But definitely get that scheduled because I know we'd find a lot of those new projects really fascinating to hear about. And hopefully it motivates you and encourages you and gets the community behind whatever it is you're working on.
Yep.
So definitely encourage you to do that. Of course, the address, feedback@bsdnow.tv, send everything over there. So if you have questions or comments, if you see stories out on the net, send those in. We love getting links and whatnot. And a lot of times that ends up being what gets put in the show next week because sometimes you guys find stuff before we can find it. So really appreciate it. Keep sending that stuff in and we'll see you same time next week.